I was 40 weeks and 2 days pregnant. It was 8:30 p.m. My pajamas were on and I was getting ready to go to bed. Will baby Danny arrive tonight? It was a question I was asking myself every night, but just in case, I needed to get as much sleep as I could. I was feeling slightly crampy. The best way I could describe it is, it felt like I was about to get my period. Not really painful, but you knew that something was a little different. Was this the beginning of labor, or was this another false alarm? I had had a few false alarms up until this point. We shall see. Time to sleep. As I was getting ready to go to bed, I noticed that the cramping was getting more intense. Were these contractions? Unsure. Let me call the midwife. I gave my midwife, Rachel, a call. She told me, take a Benadryl and try to get some sleep. I told her I would, but I didn't. I knew Benadryl could make me drowsy, and the last thing I wanted to be if I were to give birth was drowsy. You know, just in case this was the real deal. And I'm glad I listened to my instincts. Within just a few minutes of making that phone call, my cramping intensified, and it intensified quickly. I texted a friend and I told her, I think the baby is coming. I think he's coming tonight. I called the midwife back and I told her, this is definitely the real deal. He's coming. And she told me to come into the hospital right away. I started to get excited. I changed out of my pajamas and into a white dress, this dress actually, which I had planned to wear for Danny's birthday. My hospital bag was packed, but my husband didn't have all of his things together. He quickly tried to throw some clothes together for himself. As he was getting ready, I was timing the crampy feelings, which I now knew were not just crampy feelings, they were contractions. They were getting closer and closer together. When a contraction came on, I tried to breathe through them as I had been learning to do. When a contraction stopped, I was back to normal and I could do everything. When one came on again, I had to stop what I was doing and pause and breathe. My husband was taking forever to gather our things and to load the car. At least it felt like forever to me. Would the baby arrive before he finished packing? I thought to myself. What if the baby comes in the car? Oh, here's another contraction. My husband asked me a question. I have no idea what he was saying, and when the contraction ended, I told him to stop asking me questions during contractions. My mom was awake and she was preparing to drive us to the hospital-connected birth center that I was scheduled to go to. Finally, my husband finished loading the car and we got in. The hospital was 1 hour away. It was a long drive. I put on my headphones and I started listening to my hypnobirthing audio tracks. I had enrolled in Hypnobabies and had the meditation tracks saved to my phone. The contractions got more and more intense. The car ride felt endless. I wanted to cry every time the car went through a bumpy road or over a pothole. Finally, we arrived at the hospital. The front desk told us which floor to go to and we checked in at the birthing center. I was placed in a small room where a nurse came in and checked to see if I was truly having contractions. I was. Once she determined that I was in fact in labor, I was transferred to the hospital-connected birthing center, which was basically just a room in the hospital with a very large bed and a nice bathtub. My midwife arrived. I wanted to get into the bathtub right away. Maybe the warm water would make the pain go away, I thought to myself. She started filling up the tub. Waiting for the bathtub to fill up felt like an eternity. Once I got in, however, the warm water enveloped me and I felt slightly more relaxed, but only slightly. I didn't want to listen to my hypnobirthing tracks anymore. I just wasn't feeling it in that moment and I was craving some nice music. My husband put on some shamanic music that I liked listening to, and we played 2 songs on repeat over and over again for hours. The music kept me going. The contractions were ramping up. I forgot where my phone was. I didn't notice my mom or my husband taking pictures. I thought I would feel awkward about being naked in front of my mom, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered. My surroundings disappeared as I traveled beyond time and space in my mind. The pain intensified, but I knew I could do this. I had prepared myself for this mentally for months. I was doing this unmedicated. That's what I told myself. Contractions ramping up. The bath water was getting cold. I turned the water on. My husband turned it off. I turned it on again. he turned it off again. I got angry. He said the bathtub was about to overflow. I didn't care. I said I was cold, and in that moment I cared about nothing else except the hot water. It was 1:30 a.m. The midwife checked on me. I was fully dilated. Contractions ramping up. Uh-oh, my body felt like it needed to push. The midwife came to check on me again. She said, "The baby's coming soon, and you need to get out of the bathtub." Since this birth center was part of the hospital, they had to follow hospital policies, and the hospital didn't allow for water births. Getting out of the bathtub felt unbearable. I felt like the head was just right there, and standing up was so hard. Leaving the warm water to be in a cold hospital room soaking wet, I went over to the bed. I was shivering. I knew that laying flat on my back was the worst position for giving birth. So I laid down sideways. But as time passed, my position shifted and I ended up on my back at some point. I felt like I lost my strength. I wanted to sleep in between contractions. I wanted to rest. I was cold. Why do they keep the temperature so low in here, I wondered. My midwife told me that it's time to start pushing with each contraction. It felt like the hardest thing I ever had to do in my entire life. I felt like I didn't have enough air in my lungs for this. In that moment, I remember thinking, we're not having a second kid. This is it for me, just one kid. This is really hard. The head was right there. With every push, it seemed to come out just a little bit more. But then it went back in. The sounds I made when giving birth were sounds I didn't even know I had in me. I reached a point where I felt like my baby would never come. Like he would be stuck inside me forever. This was too hard. I can't do it. But shortly after reaching the point where I thought, I can't do it, he came. After about an hour of pushing, Danny left my body and entered this world. Putting that feeling to words is really difficult. It felt exhilarating. All my pain immediately disappeared in an instant. I felt so many emotions all at once. I had a baby. I made this baby. The baby's here. I gave birth. I did it. Welcome to the world, little guy. I had never felt prouder of myself in my entire life. I can do hard things. And 2 years later, I did it again. We can all do hard things. This was the story of the birth of my son Danny, my first child, who's now 2 years old. The details of my birth are slowly fading as time passes, so I wanted to make this both to remember the birth and to share a positive birth story that is both realistic and encouraging. Or at least, I hope it is. If you prepare yourself mentally, you can do anything. So, what did you think about Danny's birth? How would you summarize it?
Danny's birth was very scary.
Come on, scary for the men because they get to see what we don't see.
Right, because we're right there and we are actually seeing everything.